What happens when a simple, everyday garbage route crosses an international border? Well, it turns into a flashpoint in a super high-stakes geopolitical game. So let's dive into how a stream of trash trucks rolling from Ontario to Michigan is now smack in the middle of a major trade dispute.
First, you gotta understand the scale we're talking about here. That's how much Canadian garbage Michigan landfills take in every single year. Yeah, we're not talking about a couple of bags here and there. This is a massive, organized, and literal river of refuse flowing south.
And that really gets us to the heart of this whole explainer. How in the world did something as, boring as taking out the trash become a bargaining chip in this tense standoff? We're talking tariffs, treaties, and even threats of a border shutdown.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at why this whole trash trade is even a thing. Then we'll get into why Michigan has finally reached its tipping point and how Ontario is scrambling to fight back. After that, we'll zoom out to the bigger picture, the geopolitics of it all, before seeing how everything is set to collide during a crucial trade agreement review.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. And look, this isn't some new thing. This has been going on for decades, and it's all built on some pretty simple economics and, frankly, pure necessity.
The bottom line is Ontario is just running out of room. Experts are warning that their landfill capacity could be completely gone in about a decade. The crisis really kicked off when some of their major landfills closed down, causing their own disposal costs to skyrocket from around $12 a ton to nearly $60. So Michigan, with all its cheap and available landfill space, became the perfect and necessary escape hatch. Today, more than a quarter of all the trash that Ontario landfills gets put on a truck and sent across the border.
And wow, this slide right here, it just lays it all out. It really puts into perspective how dependent Ontario has become. Almost 15% of all the trash being buried in Michigan's soil is actually from Canada. That is a wild number, and it shows you just how much the province relies on its neighbor.
Okay, so now let's flip the coin and look at this from Michigan's side. See, for years, they've basically been the go-to dumping ground for the region, and frankly, their patience is wearing thin. They believe the price has just been way too low for way too long.
The numbers on this table, they tell you everything you need to know. Michigan charges a state fee of just 36 cents per ton to dump waste. Just 36 cents! Now, compare that to its neighbors. Ohio is at almost $5, and Wisconsin is at a whopping $13. This rock-bottom price created what they call a magnet effect, just pulling in trash from everywhere, especially Ontario.
So what's the response? Well, Governor Gretchen Whitmer's proposal is bold, to say the least. A nearly 1,300% increase in that fee. The idea isn't just about making money, it's a huge deterrent. It's designed to bring Michigan's prices in line with everyone else and basically turn off that garbage magnet for good.
And get this, if the fee hike actually goes through, it's expected to bring in about $80 million in new revenue every year. And that cash isn't just going into a general fund, it's got a specific job. Cleaning up old, contaminated sites and investing in Michigan's own recycling programs.
But the real reason for all this? It's urgency, plain and simple. At the rate things are going, Michigan's own landfills are set to be completely full in just about 21 years. So for them, this isn't about being petty or starting a fight, it's about protecting a critical resource that's running out.
So, with Michigan threatening to make things way more expensive or even shut the door completely, Ontario's had to switch up its game plan. You could call it a strategy for self-preservation. And this quote from Ontario's Premier Doug Ford, it says it all. He's expertly reframing the whole issue. He's not just talking about trash anymore. He's talking about sovereignty. He's using the Trump threat, the possibility of tariffs or a border shutdown, to justify taking some pretty aggressive action at home.
And the centerpiece of that action is this controversial project, the Dresden landfill. I mean, just look at this timeline. First, the government promises a full, thorough environmental review, which was a huge victory for local opponents. But then, the landfill's owner sues them, and suddenly, the government does a complete 180, introducing a new bill to exempt that exact same project from the very review it had just promised.
So how did they do that? They used a tool called Bill 5, and this thing is powerful. It basically gives the government the authority to create these special economic zones where they can just bypass environmental laws to fast-track projects they decide are critical. Projects like, you guessed it, the Dresden landfill.
Okay, so as you can probably guess, this whole thing is super controversial. It's come out that the developers behind the landfill are also, big-time donors to the premier's political party. And while the official reason for pushing this through is the Trump threat, it sparked this firestorm of opposition from local communities and First Nations who feel like they've just been thrown under the bus.
All right, let's zoom out a little bit, because none of this is happening in a bubble. It's all unfolding right in the middle of a really tense trade renegotiation, with the constant threat of new tariffs hanging over everything.
One of the key weapons in this fight is something called the Section 122 tariff. It's basically a tool that lets the U.S. president slap a temporary surcharge on pretty much all imports. It's become a go-to move in the current trade environment, and it creates this massive cloud of uncertainty for anything trying to cross the border.
So here's what it all boils down to. If your waste disposal service can be proven to be USMCA compliant, great. You're duty-free, no problem. If not, bam! You could be looking at a 10% surcharge. And that threat is what makes proving compliance absolutely critical.
And trust me, getting that compliance stamp is a bureaucratic nightmare. It requires a mountain of paperwork for origin verification. This isn't just about delays, it drives up real costs, like transportation insurance for Ontario trucking companies. It's why you're seeing this huge push for new tech solutions. People are talking about a digital refinery workflow, which is a fancy way of saying an automated system that handles all this paperwork for you. It takes all this messy data, cleans it up, and spits out a perfect, verified PDF that says, yep, this truck is good to go. It's all about making a chaotic process smooth and predictable.
So you've got Michigan's fees, Ontario's landfill scramble, and these U.S. tariff threats, and it's all coming to a head on one very important date: the mandatory review of the North American trade deal, scheduled for July 2026.
And right at the center of all this is a major legal showdown. On one hand, the trade deal has this core principle, national treatment, which basically says, hey, Michigan, you can't treat Canadian trash differently than your own. But on the other hand, U.S. law itself makes it really hard for states to block stuff from crossing their borders. So the big question is, can Michigan raise its fees without technically discriminating and breaking the treaty? That's the million-dollar question they have to sort out.
And the stakes here are just massive. This could all go one of three ways. In the best-case scenario, they extend the deal, maybe with a few changes, and things calm down. But in the worst-case scenario, a failure to agree could trigger what's called a sunset clause, which would start a 10-year countdown to the end of the deal and kick off an immediate, almost catastrophic landfill crisis back in Ontario.
Which leaves us with one last question to chew on. In this new landscape where everything is political, is a truckload of trash really just garbage anymore? Or has it become something else entirely? A weapon in a new and much more aggressive era of trade warfare?